Welcome to the politically incorrect parenting advice for new dads who are insanely ambitious entrepreneurs. My name is Craig Ballantyne. I'm the host of Early to Rise Radio. This is the most popular post that I have put on my Instagram in months, maybe even in the last year or 2 years. And I wrote it up for a friend of mine who's an insanely ambitious entrepreneur who's doing $10 million a year or more already in his business. And he has a baby coming in a couple of months. And I told him, brother, you are going to have to make some major changes in your life. But also there are a lot of things that nobody tells you. None of these Instagram parenting advices, who are always just trying to teach you about, how to get them to eat solid foods and put stickers on airplane windows. Like, I get it. That's important stuff. But for the insanely ambitious entrepreneur, the father, and the women who are insanely ambitious moms, nobody talks to you about what's really going to happen when you're trying to run an 8-figure business and you're trying to, not get a dad bod and you're trying to support your wife and trying to be the best dad ever. I'm going to drop the knowledge here in this presentation. We're going to talk about the biggest muscle that you have to grow, about all the preparation that you have to make in advance of your baby coming, and how to buy back your wife's time. So listen, I got 3 kids under 3. Well, technically, the one is 3, so 3 and 2 months. So maybe they're not all under 3 anymore. But, we just traveled 4.5 hours to Cabo. Those flights were enjoyable. We love being with our kids, and they were great memory makers, that's for sure. And we have our hands full, and we wouldn't have it any other way. And we've learned a lot over our little journey. And I'm an insanely ambitious entrepreneur who's saying things that nobody else will tell you. So this is really new content. Now, the first thing that you have to do, part 1, and part 1 through 99, and the rest is, less important than what I'm going to tell you right now, is that as a new dad, you have to 100x your empathy. Listen, men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and that's true. And then once you hit pregnancy, women are from like some other galaxy, man. They are not even in the same solar system. And I mean this in a beautiful, loving way. Hormones and pregnancy, the physical changes, it wreaks havoc on a mom's body and her emotions. And especially if your wife, your spouse, your partner, girlfriend, whatever you are calling them these days, is really into fitness. To be really into fitness and have control over their body, plus or minus, a little bit when they get bloated during their menstrual cycle, to going and being 40 pounds over their normal body weight. It's mind-blowing. And I don't think most men couldn't handle it, who are really into fitness. It's like when you can't work out for a day, you get all freaked out. Now imagine not being able to, some women work out pretty hard, I will say that, and stick with it. But imagine putting on 40 pounds. Like, you get freaked out when you have 2 cheat meals a week. So it is very hard on them. And as a man, you are logical, you are rational, and you want to solve the problem instantly. Nearly every guy is like this. And my friend who, I'm very much like that. I am super rational, super logical. My friend is he's like 3 times more logical and rational than me. And this is really hard on him right now because it's really hard on his wife. And it's much harder on her than it is on him. But he's having a difficult time, and he really needs to become more empathetic. Now, becoming more empathetic makes you a better person in so many ways. So learning how to do active listening, acknowledging what they are feeling, and supporting them and asking them to share and share and share. My wife is an external processor. I'm an internal processor. So, that just does give our challenges even more challenge. And you just need to not try and fix the problem instantly. Let them talk, and then say, my friend who's a coach in our business, Galel Fajardo, he says to his wife, do you want me to help solve the problem or do you want me to listen? And he frames the start of the conversation so that he is then holding, like if she says, just listen, then he's not going to solve the problem until she says, okay, let's talk about solutions. So men, I know you want to solve the problem and be on to the next thing and solve it because that's what we do. We are problem solvers, and a lot of us are logical and rational, but that's not how they want it. A friend of mine who was talking to me told me to get a book by a woman named, her last name is Brizendine, and it's called The Female Brain. And it's a Harvard PhD, so I've ordered it. I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to learn about the female brain because I sure as heck don't have one. So on the logical side, one of the challenges that we had is that moms may resist help even when they need it. They know they need it, right? And so I'm going to talk a lot about buying back your wife's time I'm going to say your wife. I'm not going to say partner. I think partner is a ridiculous word to talk about, the woman who just had your kids. Like, it's not your business partner. it's your wife, man. And and so, it's the mother of your children, much more than a partner. And so, she may resist nanny help. She may resist babysitters. She may resist housekeepers, and listen, there's a lot of people in our house some days and we don't like it, but we really need to buy back their time. And so logically, they know they need to have the help, but the pregnancy hormones, they're very protective when they have the baby and they may resist it. So you need to be prepared for that even though she's exhausted, even though that, the house is a bit of a mess and she doesn't like the mess and so on and so forth. And I say this not from experience, just my own relationship, but in coaching hundreds of insanely ambitious entrepreneurs who have kids under the age of 5 and brand new babies, and well, as opposed to an old baby, obviously brand new babies. And I've seen this over and over again, and it's hard for us logically and rationally to figure it out, but we just need to support them. Let them talk it out. Let them talk themselves into the solution. Much like when you're a salesperson, you ask the right questions and the person talks themselves into the sale. You don't talk somebody into a sale. They talk themselves into the sale. So understand that even though they're tired, the house is a mess, and they need help, they may resist it for many reasons. And you have to be okay with that. And you have to let them come to their own conclusions. You can support it. All right. You need to increase your empathy muscle. A couple issues that have come up in our house and with many friends of Michelle is, around the issue of breastfeeding. And, both Michelle and I were actually formula fed babies. We turned out okay. I've only got 3 heads. And so, just JK. And so, but, if breastfeeding is their goal and there's problems with latching or producing milk, this can really trigger mom guilt. We had another friend whose baby wouldn't take a bottle. And I mean, that's so exhausting. And of course she thinks, well, there's something wrong with me, but there's nothing wrong with you. It's just, babies are all, they all have their thing, right? And so there's a lot of mom guilt triggered by them and their expectations. They expect that the birth is going to go this way. Our birth did not go as expected the first time. The second two fairly well because they were planned C-sections because they had to be. And we knew what we were going to have with the C-section. But the first one, we had this jungle birth and a water bath and all this stuff. And it ended up in an emergency C-section because that's just the way it had to go because that's for the safety of the baby. And gosh, Michelle did 40 hours of labor. It was insane. And I was going to save this for later. Like when we had that baby, I was like, well, that's the only baby we're having. There's no way she's going to go through this again. And sure enough, the next day she's talking about having another baby. Postpartum hormones are unpredictable. And there's mood swings and all that sort of stuff. Just like every month when your wife is not pregnant, the hormonal system of a woman leads to mood swings. And, that's why the videos about women who are in mood swings. I remember this one lady made a video about how her husband expected when he came home from a work trip that she was going to be super excited, but she was on the time of the month in the menstrual cycle where she was a monster, and she made a video about it, and there was like 3,000 shares of this. Everybody knows this happens. That's why there's 3,000 shares of content around this. Now, I put these pictures up here specifically because they are posted by Michelle. I only put pictures that Michelle posts up because if I would have posted these pictures at the wrong time, she may have gotten upset with me. Because, to me, like they're all fine pictures. They're all great pictures. But, depending on the day, she may not have liked it and it would have caused some tension. So things are unpredictable. So I've learned my lesson many, many times. The big lesson is that listening early saves time and it saves fights later. So increase your empathy muscle. Increase your empathy because you need to listen. You need to not solve the problems because if you try and solve a problem right away and she feels unsupported, then you will have a 3 to 5 times longer argument later and it's just going to waste everybody's time. So be that person who learns to listen and that will make you a much, much better husband and father. All right. So that's the first thing. The bonus here that I want to add is that 99% of families don't create core values. And here's me and our oldest daughter going through the Cabo airport and she's riding on the luggage and she's got glasses. It's really cute. And we created core values for our family. It's love, honesty, freedom, personal responsibility, and independent thinking. Those are the core values that Michelle and I set out and we're going to live by. And when you have these core values, you're on the same page and women want to be supported and on the same page as their husband or their partner. And, they want it and they need it during pregnancy. So the first couple of weeks after your baby comes, this is part 2 of new dad advice. The baby sleeps a lot. So you're going to start to think like, oh my God, I'm really good at parenting. The baby's just sleeping a lot. And if you bought back your time, as I recommend with a nanny and a night nurse, I'll get to that in a second. If you bought back your time well, it's a game changer. And all of a sudden you're going to be like, man, yeah, no, this is no problem. And then all of a sudden, after about a few weeks, it's really months 3 to 5. I wrote down weeks 3 to 5. It's months 3 to 5 get hard with teething. So just when you think you've got this, just when your baby is sleeping like, man, 6 hours a night last night, this is awesome. And if you have multiple babies, the other ones are sleeping 10 or 11 hours. You got the other one sleeping 6 hours. You think that you're a pro, and then all of a sudden teething. And nobody told us much about teething. But teething was probably one of the most difficult parts of the first year of the baby, because it comes and goes, it ebbs and flows. There's all this slobber and the crying and the hands in the mouth, and you don't know what's going on at first because people just don't really talk about it. They say, oh yeah, you're not going to sleep, and diaper changes and all this stuff, but nobody really hones in on how teething is really horrible for everybody involved. And so it's, you're confused, the baby's confused, and it lasts really long. And it can get them up in the middle of the night. It can stop them from sleeping. There's extreme crying. Some babies have it worse than others. And again, it comes and goes. Like they might have it really bad today, and then tomorrow it's okay. And then they get the first 2 teeth, and then things settle down. And then the next teeth are not as bad. And then, our middle one is nearly 2 years old, and she's getting her final set of molars, and you can see it's going to be rough for her. It's just happening now. So that's what you can expect. You can expect like, oh my gosh, I got it. First couple of weeks, you're really tired, even with the help. And then you think you got it, and then all of a sudden you get smacked in the face by teething. So night nurse and nanny. If you don't have enough money to pay for night nurse and nanny, make more money. That's the bottom line. Like for the first 60 days, at least 3 nights a week, you need a night nurse, which is essentially just a nanny overnight, because you guys need to sleep through the night. Do that. If you can do 7 days a week, great. If you can only do 1 night a week, fine. But you need to be able to have a night of sleep. Nanny during the daytime, if you can only get 4 hours twice a week, I think that's the minimum that you can have. And if you've got grandma and auntie or your whatever, you've got some relative that can come over, great, that's fine. You just need somebody who cares, who can take care of the baby so that your wife can have a shower, can do her rehab exercises. So whether she had a natural birth or whether she had a C-section, it's going to require some rehab, and they need to get on it immediately. But if they have a baby latched to them 24/7 and they're exhausted, they are not going to be able to do their rehab, and they are not going to be able to have a shower and eat regular food, and they're not going to be able to go and just have a break, especially if your wife normally went to the nail salon and normally went and got pedicures and normally went and got her hair done and all that sort of stuff. And now she can't leave the house. It is a real hard transition. And here you are just, you're kind of going, man, I've only got to the gym 3 times per week this week. Oh my gosh, this parenting's really hard. It's a joke. I'm laughing at my own joke because it's such a great joke, because you have no idea how hard this is on your wife. All right. So pay somebody to come in and help you and help your wife get some time back. Because again, if you buy back your wife's time, you're buying back your own time, because if you don't, your wife is going to be exhausted. And when you're tired, what do? You get in fights. So we'll get to that in a second too, because, well, I'll get to it right now. The best piece of advice I got about parenting was from my friend Ed O'Keefe. And Ed O'Keefe said, you can be tired and your wife can be tired, but you cannot be tired at the same time. Because if you are tired at the same time, the molehill becomes a mountain and you have a fight. So you can be tired, your wife can be tired, but you cannot be tired at the same time. So how do you do that? How do you avoid being tired at the same time? Sleep schedule, different sleep schedules. So my wife and I were told this months in advance, and we talked about this, and we realized if I can sleep from 8 p.m. to 1 a.m., it's like I've had 8 hours of sleep. I know you're going to say that's not 8 hours of sleep. You're gonna die a horrible death when you're 35 years old. I'm 50, and so on and so forth. And the sleep experts will not like. But for the first couple months, if I could sleep from 8 p.m. to 1 a.m., I was good. And my wife needs more sleep and wants to sleep later. So what she did was, if the baby got up at 10 o'clock, we both went to bed at like 7:30 or 8. We always have. And If the baby got up at 10 or 10:30, she would take care of the baby. And then if the baby got up anytime after 1, it was on me. And, I could get baby back to sleep and I'd get my work session in, and I kept to the routine as much as possible. So we were able to do that. And so she made this little video, "Wow, you handled postpartum so well." This is our oldest baby. We're in Miami at the Fontainebleau overlooking the ocean. I had a speaking engagement and we took the family to Disney and then down there. And, she, like, the reason why she was able to handle postpartum really well is because I was able to come in, and with the help of the night nurse and nanny. I wasn't a superhero. I took care of dinner. I took the baby. I allowed my wife to go have a nap. I made sure, we had massages. She had massages up to pregnancy. She had this like specific massage bed where her belly went in. It was pretty cool. And it's just like showing the support. Now, I work from home. I work right beside the kids all day long. And so I'm often helping out because I designed my life to allow myself to do that. I understand if you can't, but you do the best of what you can, given what you can. So I suggest that you get the night nurse for 60 days minimum, preferably 90 days. Make sure that you have somebody in the daytime. I highly recommend somebody 8 to 5, 6 days a week. And maybe one day you guys raw dog it and like there's nobody in the house and it's just you and your wife and the kid. And when you have one kid, you think it's pretty hard. But once you have 2 or 3 kids, like one kid is like barely harder than having a dog, man. After, aside from teething, it's really not that hard. 2 kids is pretty manageable. And 3 kids is more difficult because you are outnumbered. I don't like to admit it because I hated when people said, "Oh, when you hit 3 kids, it's going to be so much harder." It is definitely harder, but going from 0 to 1 is the hardest. Going from 2 to 3 is hard, but going from 0 to 1 is definitely the biggest change, obviously. So you keep that night nurse as long as possible. You want to keep the team. You want to have the team. You want to have the grandmas and the great grandmas. We had all 4 generations in the house at one time, and you just need the breaks. And it's amazing to have, if you can have a grandma, a great grandma. And my wife's mom is amazing, absolutely amazing. And she comes over twice a week for a few hours, and the kids adore her and they have so much fun. And it's absolutely awesome. And even when we lived in Mexico, we were very lucky because my wife's mom, grandma to my kids, my mother-in-law, she's a flight attendant for Air Canada. So she would fly from Vancouver to Cancun, come over to our house for like 18 hours and then fly back. And she would do that almost every week. It was great. Like we lived in Cancun and grandma still came over every week. It was awesome. So you want your wife to be able to return to exercise and, her mood starts to stabilize. But postpartum hormones, man, like you've heard the horror stories. You've read the stories about postpartum moms hurting their kids. That doesn't happen in our house, obviously, but you have heard horror stories. What postpartum hormones can do to a woman is rough, and you need to prepare for it and support your wife through this. For us, 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. is when we had the kids alone, no nannies. And, it was challenging, but, we were higher energy. But 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., man, those were some of our toughest times. Especially our first kiddo didn't do well with the formula that we started with. That's our guess. And sometimes from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., she just screamed. And so sometimes we had to put her in the car. Like, it's another cliche, but sometimes you got to do it. So here's the 4 generations of the family. There's Grandma Lori off to the right. There's great grandma in the middle, and there's Michelle and her first baby. And so there's a lot of pre-birth prep that you can do. And again, it's planning to buy back the time, figuring out the schedule as much as you can. We had one of these wall calendars when our third baby came along of like, okay, so here are the nannies for this day. Here are the nannies for this day. Here's the night nurse for this day. Is like, we were like basically running a business with all the people. And again, you're giving your wife time for eating, showering, recovery, things that you will take for granted as a father. We had to do a lot of nanny support because she had to do hardcore C-section recovery. She had to do workouts every day and all this stuff. Now, another thing is that we had a housekeeper in Mexico come once or twice a week. And we never figured out the meal prep stuff because we didn't like the food that they made, as much. And here in Vancouver, we have 2 different meal prep services. So we have this one, like, is the delivery of the ingredients and you cook it. And that's helpful. But we found another one it's called Fed. And so we're using Fresh Prep for the meal delivery of the ingredients. And now we found this one called Fed. And the meals are really awesome. I don't know if it's nationwide. I don't know if it's in America. But man, it is just such a saver of time because, when you are busy with the baby and, if your wife normally makes the meals and stuff like that, it's going to be too hard on her. She's going to be exhausted. So get a meal prep service or get a housekeeper that can also cook for you. Housekeeper once a week should be fine unless you're really fanatical about stuff on the floor. I don't care if there's stuff all over the place, except I don't like dishes in the sink. I'm OCD about it, so I do the dishes, or I'll throw stuff in the dishwasher and run it once a day. But laundry, there's going to be a lot of onesies that are going to be covered in food, and so you're going to need extra help with stuff. And if you want to enjoy the time with your kids and not be like doing laundry with a kid in one hand and laundry in another hand, get a little extra help, man. Buy back your time, buy back these precious moments with your kids. And all of this buys back your time so that you have 3 to 6 quality hours per day to run your business. And if you run your business right, you don't need full 8 hours. You just need 3 to 6 quality hours. And then you can get in 30 to 45-minute workouts per week and some walks and all that sort of stuff. Stay as active as you can with the baby. Lots of walks outside. They fall asleep really well. You get out of the house with the baby. Your wife gets some more time on her own. Definitely do that sort of stuff. All right. So you also need to offset fatigue. And as I mentioned, you can't both be tired at once. You need to have those strategic sleep schedules and know who's going to handle the baby. That's like, you need to have that SOP. If the baby gets up at this time, who's doing it? Because if the baby gets up in the middle of the night, it's not a 2-person job. And so one person has to be okay with saying, you sleep. And the other person has to be okay and let go of the guilt of being allowed to sleep, because you don't have time for that. You just got to be like, okay, you go sleep, I'll go do the work, because it's my shift. And that needs to be clearly articulated. And when you get to 2 kids, what I learned is the communication has to go to another level, because you have to know who's taking care of who. And that way, otherwise, we've had all the bumps and bruises, and I didn't realize I was supposed to be watching the older one. She was in the little one's stroller because she thought it was hilarious. And of course she fell and bonked her head. But, we've been lucky, the kids are doing great. So just know who does what by when. That's a question in your business, and it should be a question in your parenting. Who does what by when? All right. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you see a picture. There's a Mexican Mother's Day, which is May 10th every year. So it's always the 10th of May. And some days, 6 years out of 7, I guess, or 5 years out of 6 with a leap year, I guess, it falls on a different day than American Mother's Day. So this is a Mexican Mother's Day. I hired a mariachi band to come to serenade Michelle. Here's some other things that most people don't tell you. So when she's pregnant, she's going to have all types of crazy, weird aches and pains. And it's usually from this relaxin hormone. So one of my friend who I did all this stuff for, he said, did your wife ever have the wobbles? And I'm like, what the heck are the wobbles? And apparently the wobbles are some women, wobble all over the place because relaxin messes up their hips. Well, no, Michelle didn't have that, but she had some rib pain and some back pain and stuff. And it was probably from this relaxin hormone. So your wife should be doing a ton of core strength. Not sit-ups and crunches, but like deep core strength. Get a pelvic floor physio and go to them pre-birth and go to them right after birth. This is vital. So there's physiotherapists that specialize in pelvic floor, because Michelle had a bit of sciatica after, and this pelvic floor physiotherapist was awesome. Every pregnancy is unique, even with the same mom. So the first time Michelle had COVID during pregnancy and she had rib pain. The second time she had some other problems that were totally different than the first one. She was dizzy in the first trimester, never had morning sickness, fortunately. And then the third baby, she had some back pain, I think. All this, same mom, different pregnancies, different problems. It's so wild, man. You're going to feel helpless because as a man, you can do nothing. You cannot solve these pains. You cannot take away the fatigue. But it's magical in that the mom forgets about labor pains as soon as the baby's out. It's like, oh yeah, it was crazy pain. Ha ha ha. Like, what? You were screaming bloody murder and now like you're ha ha haing about it? Insane. Insane in a lovely way, man. It is so awesome. The miracle of birth. There's miracle upon miracle upon miracle, right? There's a miracle that you meet this woman. There's a miracle that she even gives you the time of day. There's a miracle that you get married. There's a miracle that you have a baby, like you get pregnant, because how many people do you know are trying IVF and waited too long or whatever it was, right? And you're able to get your wife pregnant. Oh my gosh, that's a miracle. Miracle upon miracles. And then it develops healthy. And then she's able to give birth and everybody's healthy. So let's say like there's 6 miracles per birth times 3, we have, exponential. So 6 by 6 by 6, man, that's a number of miracles that have happened in this house. So, we had the baby in Cancun because we had our first baby in 2021. If we had the baby in Canada, it may have been, I might not even been allowed in the operating room. We wouldn't have been able to try this jungle birth that went wrong. There's all types of things. And so we were like, we're going to go to Mexico. Our kids got second passports. Mexico is so much better for nannies because it's such a family oriented country. Like, you go to the nicest steakhouse in Cancun and they got a kids club. They all have kids clubs. And, there's little babysitters in there taking, like, they have a day for kids. Like, you have Mother's Day and Father's Day in America. But in Mexico, you have Dia del Niños, which is Day of the Kids. They just celebrate family and kids down there. And it was really wonderful, wonderful thing for us. And so we're very happy about that. A little bit more tactical advice. Here's a post that Michelle says, and, we have people say, oh, you must have your hands full. You must be so busy. And they say it in this negative voice when they see us with the 3 kids. And we smile and we say, we wouldn't have it any other way, man. We wouldn't have it any other way. We flew back from Cabo. We were in economy. We were like, hey man, we're going to spend a ton of money on the hotel, but we're going to be cheap on the flight. 4.5-hour flight. We were in row 22. We were the last people on the plane, and all 3 kids screamed their heads off as we walked down the row. It was like, it wasn't a walk of shame though, because I didn't care, because I mean, listen, it's a baby, baby's on the plane, baby's going to scream. You can deal with it for 7 seconds, once we pass by your row. So, I don't feel any shame anymore. I used to, but Michelle got me over it. And if people would have given me a negative look, I'd be like, this is the greatest moment of my life. I'm with my 3 kids at age 50. Man, people gave up on me. So many people gave up on me, and I still won. All right. I won the best thing ever. I got all these 50th birthday messages, and I realized people like, man, I can't believe that you actually pulled this off, and you've got a family. Like, people actually gave up on me, and I didn't know that because I never gave up on myself. Interesting. I'm going to write a post about that because it's so important, and it's something I never knew, and I never even thought that people gave up on me because I never gave up on myself. Anyways, practical advice for dads: fix your injuries. You are like, if you've never done a Turkish get-up, you should actually start doing them with a sandbag. I never did them. I'm just doing them now because I'm actually rehabbing my body because I've got a whole bunch of aches and pains and I don't properly activate my core. I sound like a pregnant woman, and I've got a lot of anterior pelvic tilt, not posterior pelvic tilt. And now I got shoulder problems because my core is not managing the load. And so what we're doing is a lot of Turkish get-ups with sandbags. And that's what you're going to do when you have a baby. You're going to be nap trapped with a baby, and you're going to have to get up off the floor, off a mattress, off the couch, off all of these things. And you're going to have to lift your baby up, and you're going to have to, twist and turn. And if you are out of shape, if you have injuries, man, you are going to pay the price, and you are going to be like, honey, I can't lift the baby up. And that's a pretty weak position. I've never been in that position, but there was a while there where I was doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which was a dumb idea at 46. And I couldn't lift my arms over my shoulders. Now, fortunately, everything I did with the kids, I didn't have to do that, but man, I was in a lot of pain. So if you have injuries, get them fixed. Also, get a pediatrician with 24/7 access. You may be able to do that with private pediatricians in America. We could do that in Mexico. You could, in Mexico, WhatsApp your pediatrician at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they might wake up and answer. It's unbelievable. Here in Canada, you cannot even get a hold of a doctor by phone. In BC, you don't even get a pediatrician. You have to go to your family physician, which is very difficult to get a family physician. I'm very livid about the Canadian health system. We were out of the country off and on, and they kicked us out of the Canadian health system. So I paid my Canadian taxes all the time. I pay more Canadian taxes than people make in years. Every year I pay that much. And when we came back in October of 2024, we had to wait 3 months to be allowed back into the Canadian health system because they removed us because we were out of the country too long. I do not like the Canadian healthcare system and who's in charge of it. So I'm not a big fan of it. So that's one bad thing about Canada, but there's a lot of good things about Vancouver where I live. But we can't have this pediatrician with 24/7 access in Canada, but we could in Mexico. And you can in America. You will obviously have to pay a lot more money for it. But in Mexico, everybody was on your WhatsApp. You could just WhatsApp doctors all day long, man. It was awesome. All right. The third thing is establish a baby routine ASAP so that you know when they're going to be sleeping, you know when they're going to be eating, and you know when they're going to be crying, because they will have these witching hours is what they call it. And you have to be mentally prepared so that you're not really tired during the witching hours when they're going to cry for 3 straight hours, which is usually right before before bed. Car rides work. Don't be afraid to use that trick. Don't be afraid to put the baby in the stroller and go for a long walk. Hopefully the weather's nice for it. I went through for a lot of walks in Mexico when it was like 30 degrees and 90% humidity, but the baby was okay with it and fell asleep. I was just trying not to burn myself to death. But you need to use the walk and the drive. And it's a cliche, like, my 3-year-old loves watching Peppa Pig, and in one of the episodes, they do both of those things to to get the baby to sleep. Everybody knows it works. Don't be afraid to use it. And then you're going to be nap trapped at one point. And nap trapped means you're going to be under a baby that you dare not move, right? You work so hard to get to this baby to sleep, and now you're lying on the couch and the baby is sleeping on your chest, and you're like, I can't move. I cannot move from this position. Because if I do, this baby may wake up and it may take me another 3 hours to get them to bed. So if I have to lie here for 3 hours, I will lie here for 3 hours so the baby sleeps. And so you need to be mentally prepared to have things to think about because, it's cute and you look at your baby, but eventually after like 7 minutes, you're going to be like, okay, now I'm kind of bored and I can't get to the remote control for the TV if you watch TV. And so you're stuck, right? So you need to either have your phone so you can like read a book on a Kindle. Don't be scrolling social media. Or you need to be able to have some problems to think through in your head. Use that quiet time to think, is what I tell my insanely ambitious entrepreneur friends, because you want to be as productive as possible. And then a final thought, this is getting a little bit ahead of the curve, but behaviors are caught, not taught. And so as your kid gets to the age where they start to say words, you better be very careful with what you say. Now, we don't swear in our household, which, we've worked on for a long time. But if you drop a word in front of your kid, the kid's going to say it because they don't know what it means. And so I say holy cow all the time. And our one daughter runs around saying, holy cow. Like, if I would have said another phrase that a lot of people use, now your kid's running around saying that phrase. And this goes for every type of behavior, not just what they say. So behaviors are caught, not taught. And this is another great business lesson, because how you act as a leader in your business is how your team members are going to act. So if you hit the panic button, everybody's going to hit the panic button. If you're calm and controlled when something happens, everyone's going to be calm and controlled. So there's a lot of parenting lessons in here for the insanely ambitious entrepreneur, a lot of leadership lessons, a lot of business lessons. And you know what? It's just a really fun topic. I just love sharing this because it's so important to me. I know this is going to be my next book, right? This is going to be the next book, and it's going to be written by Michelle and myself. So listen, I would love to hear your feedback and your comments in a section down below. Let us know, because that will help me create more content for this book that Michelle and I are going to write together. We're not parenting experts. We're not marriage experts. We just know what an insanely ambitious male entrepreneur, for sure, and maybe a female entrepreneur, will be thinking about, will be trying to juggle as they want to have it all, right? Because an insanely ambitious person wants to be the world's best dad and build an 8-figure, 9-figure, 10-figure business. And it can be done at the same time. It can, if you take that advice. And that doesn't get into, building systems and everything that we can do. So listen, if you want to send me a private message, send me it on Instagram at @RealCraigBallantyne, or email me, craig@craigballantyne.com. All right, but comment below and let me know what you want to see in the second version of this video, so we give you all the advice so that you can be insane in both your business and your parenting. And that's what I want. More insanely ambitious entrepreneur dads, that is. All right, Craig Ballantyne from Early to Rise Radio. We'll talk to you on the next show.